to my soul, and this is my podcast. Today we're interviewing my mom. She taught me everything I know, almost everything, because I know some bad things as well, but she's been a very good parent, along with my father. I'm gonna ask her some questions in regards to what it was like raising kids, her own personal goals, and things of that nature, where she grew up and all that shit. So without further ado, let's welcome my mom. Hi, Mom.
Okay. I'm having problems with the sound. Hi, can you hear me okay?
That's perfect. I hear you well. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit. And you were going out, but you're coming back in. You're fine.
I'm fine now? Okay. Well, just for the couple seconds. So this is great. We're actually also filming a Verizon commercial, and we're starting that campaign. Can you hear me now again? So that's good as well. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be your first guest.
Well, you should, because I'm special.
Okay.
My mom told me so. So, hey, Mom, I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, like where you're from and what brought you to California. And I know you work certain places, so just give me a little bit of general information about yourself. I hate when people ask me that, but I feel that I would do a better justice of having you explain your own life than me try to tell you. So where are you originally from, Mom?
Well, I'm originally from Texas. I was born in Beaumont, raised in Houston.
Okay.
And when I was 15, until I was 15, I came to California.
Okay, now what brought you to California?
Well, my grandparents were, when they first started raising me, because my paternal grandparents started taking care of me when I was 28 days old. So from that time on until I was 4, they were together, and then they divorced when I was 4 years old, and my grandmother moved to California, so I came to be with her.
Oh, nice.
At 15.
Okay. So that's why you were so close to your grandparents.
Aunts.
Mm-hmm. Aunts, yeah. And that's Grandpa Clement, correct? That you were raised by?
My grandpa. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yep,
it's really crazy, because there's a picture of him holding you on his lap, and it just screams Kevin. Like Kevin looked.
Yeah.
They looked so close together, and it's amazing.
Kevin looks a lot like him.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. So when you came to California, you were 15. You were going to school here, and then what
10th grade.
Ambitions? 10th grade. Okay. What ambitions did you have when you got out of school? Did you know what you wanted to do, or because I mean, you write very well. You're well spoken, as people would say, but you also kind of you put that into us growing up. My brothers and I growing up to be well spoken, and that we could do anything we wanted to. Like, what were your aspirations? Like, what did you want to do growing up?
Well, I didn't feel that way when I was growing up, because I felt limited, and I wanted to change that for my children. You know, that old adage about, you do what bad people create bad people. I can't remember how it is. It's like an abused person. I know what it's. Abused people abuse people. Abused people abuse people.
Okay.
I was never like that. I just wanted a better life for my kids, because I was starting to get really, there was a lot of bad things to happen in my grandfather's home while I was still in Texas when I became a teenager. And so Emily, my little aunts, talked to Grandpa Clement and convinced him that I should come and stay with him. But I still felt, I didn't feel complete. I kind of felt unwanted. There was some problems there with Grandma, and I ended up living with Uncle Cordell and Aunt Gloria. And that's who I really patterned my life after them. Great example.
I never knew that. Yeah, that's so crazy, because I never had, and I know Kev, Mickey, and Craig never had that feeling either of feeling like they were unwanted or weren't taken care of. We were, well, what did Dave Chappelle say? We had just enough money to be the poorest people in a nice neighborhood, or something like that. It's like, that's kind of how it was. And we were taught the value of hard work, and also the value of respecting others that respect you. And it shows through, Uncle Cordell and how that was in that relationship, and that love, and how they nurtured you and cared for you. That's pretty awesome.
It is.
Well, yeah. I do have a question now. Now that you're full fledged. Oh, wait. Let's go back. What jobs did you have? I mean, because I know about Bronco, and I know about you working for Playboy, and also you worked for. Sorry.
When I worked the pole.
No, because I know you worked for Bronco, and I know you also worked at Buyer High, and as a teacher's assistant, correct?
Right.
And so what else did you do? Where else did you work, or did you? I mean, besides raising 4 children, that's a pretty daunting task in its own.
Well, my goal was to raise the best children I could raise and give it all to my children. And
right.
So I focused early years on my kids. And then I started working in the schools because, my children were in school. And so I'd help with the teachers or whatever they had for me to do. And then I really became a paraprofessional when I moved to Stockton before you were born. And I started working at McKinley School where Kevin and Mickey, and then eventually Craig was there. But Craig, we moved away from there before you were born. No, you were, I'm trying to think, when did we move?
2?
Yeah, you were born in, you were 2, yeah, exactly. 2. The way when you were 2 years old. But yeah. I never really wanted to do anything other than be a good mother. And then I wanted to educate. So that kind of moved along as my kids grew older. I wanted to still educate. So I went to school. I went to work for the school district.
Okay.
I ended up at Buyer, but I had worked in several schools.
Right. Yeah, McKinley Park, or McKinley School, and I remember. Oh, sorry. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. McKinley had a great restaurant next to it called Jimmy's Golden Star Cafe, and it was so. I still need to go there. Do you know if that's open still?
It wasn't next to it. It was
it's right down the street.
Blocks away.
Yeah.
Right.
That's next to it. I mean, it's not like it's across the street. Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It was
Jimmy's.
Good.
Yeah. Have you been there?
One of the things that. No.
Okay.
One of the things
sodium. Oh, okay,
I'm too old. Gotta watch my high blood pressure.
Look at her. She's old. I mean, she's old. We were saying one of the things that
I really wanted to instill in my children is to give them a superiority complex, not an inferior one, because I had that. And I saw so many other Black kids having inferiority complexes because they were told they were limited as to what they could do. And I never wanted that for my children. I made that decision early. So if you can remember, I used to tell you, the only thing greater than yourself is what's above, not here on earth. No person is greater than you. And I never wanted you to feel that way. Remember, I used to tell you, don't be rude to white people because you feel sorry. They can't. What? Remember?
Yeah.
Reversed it.
Yeah.
I was like a liberal white person talking to their child about Black people.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
White friends.
Right. That makes so much sense because I was always told too, I remember, you're not better than anybody else, but there's sure ain't anyone better than you. And
that's right.
You should always act that way and feel that way and carry yourself in a manner that best represents who you are. And it's very interesting because you wouldn't allow us to speak improperly. Like they call it now the grammar Nazi. Like you were the originator of that shit because we were not allowed to use improper grammar. You would always correct us, and that just stuck. And it makes, in this world we navigate, and this entire white-dominated society, through everything that we do, your language means so much. Your language is what defines you, and it's not that
communication.
It's not that there's actually a bad way of speaking. There is a bad way of speaking to a certain sect or group of people who are in power, i.e. white people. And having the ability to disarm them with their own words speaks volumes. It helps disarm so many situations when you're able to speak how they speak and actually hold a conversation and hold your own against them because they don't know what to do. And people look at you like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting that.
It's kind of like using the word nigger. I never really used you guys really didn't hear the word that we never used it, but I didn't want it to be a weapon against you. So it was kind of funny because Craig was, he was 3 or 4, maybe he was, I think you were born. He met with Uncle Ray's neighbor who was white across the street, another 5 or 6-year-old. And the neighbor called Craig a nigger, and Craig was saying, trigger. He thought it was a rhyming time. Trigger, digger, figure, nigger. Yeah. I had taught him about the sounds. He was learning the sounds, which sound goes with which family. Remember that the unfamily, you put an F and you'd have fun. So this is what he was doing with the word nigger. And I thought, interesting. But he didn't get mad because he didn't think it was anything bad.
Right. Yeah, and it's very interesting because they talk about the power that word plays into society and when you use it in a certain way. So Black people embraced it and made the word nigger. Now I'm hearing this is so fucked up.
Yeah.
Well, let's flash back real quick. When I was going to Everett and I was walking home one day and I was just walking along and all of a sudden I felt something wet on my arm. I don't know if I told you this story, but I look over to my left and there's this little blonde kid and he just goes, nigger, and he runs back up to his steps. And at that time, I was like, I knew what the word meant. And I knew that it was a bad word in association with Black people. So it just hurt me because I wasn't doing anything to anybody. I mean, I was a good kid. I wasn't mean. I wasn't anything. Like, I was a good kid. And this little blonde boy with his sister and her friend on the porch, I assume, like runs over and spits on me and calls me a nigger, which means that where did they learn? Yeah, they were on the porch.
I remember that song in South Pacific. It was called "You've Got to Be Taught," and I always remember that when I hear people, say things and do things that are so inhuman. You don't know where they got it from, but you've got to be taught to hate, to fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be taught in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. And then it goes, not be too late before 6 or 7 or 8 to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught.
Wow.
And that really weighs heavy. Because most of the things you learn are from home. You didn't learn that much in school. You might have gotten an education at school, but how to behave and how to act and how to respond and how to communicate, that came from home.
Right. And that's where and people are forgetting that. Most of that stuff happens at homes, good or bad. And it may not necessarily be something that's like racism's taught, definitely, but for a kid who's in a bad community or in a bad neighborhood and they start hanging with gangs and slanging, like that's what they know, that's their life, because they have no other options. And so it plays such a pivotal role in our lives of how we perceive life and how we move through life based upon our experiences from having parents at home. Like I was very fortunate to have both my parents together and at home. Like that's not very common for Black people in general. I guess the stats, 1 in 3 Black people end up in jail. Black males end up in jail. Like that's at some point in their life, not permanently, but at some point in their life, they do that. But yeah, so back to what we were saying earlier about the word nigga. I see white people saying, oh, they shouldn't say that word if we can't say that word. It's like, motherfucker, you stolen that's your culture. You've stolen everything else from us. If you want to say it, we can say it. Just like you wouldn't go into a church and say like, fuck, hell, damn, bitch. You wouldn't say it in church, right? Act like you're always in church around Black people and just don't say nigga. That's it. That's all we're asking. Yeah. Like it's not that big of a deal. Just it's a word you can't use. Logan said something very, very profound. I think I told you this, but this was 8 years ago. He said, white people don't have a culture. Their culture is to steal things from other cultures and claim it as their own. And I thought,
interesting.
Damn.
No, you hadn't told me that before, but that's very, very deep.
Right? Yeah. Like, damn. And he was 11, 12 at the time, maybe.
Yeah.
And I thought, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. If you think about everything that has happened, especially in this country, it's all taken from somewhere else.
Well,
what do you have
really,
original?
what happened at the Capitol, who were there left to fend for these people? You know, everybody else, they joined in because they couldn't stand. Very few can stand on their own, but Black people were there to defend them, and they did a very good job, outsmarted them. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, we've been there defending white people for a long ass time.
That's right.
It's very interesting. So, question two, like you raised four Black men in this country, and it was very interesting at the time that you raised us, because we were in a point in our lives where we weren't exposed to like the real heavy racism that existed in the South. It was more subtle racism and kind of like play along with all the associations, and thinking about all the shit that happened in my life growing up. I'm realizing that now, but at the time that's just the way it was. Do you, before we get into all that, do you have any pictures of us from when we were younger, or anything like that you could share? Or you don't have to go get them if you don't have them, but
I probably do somewhere, but we moved, and when we moved from Modesto to Stockton, then from Stockton back to Modesto, a lot of things got lost, and at that time you had to develop film. And I probably have a whole bunch of undeveloped film around here somewhere. And so you didn't have the, you know, the instant cameras and all that on your phone. You didn't even have cell phones.
Right.
So can you imagine being without a cell phone? But that's the way it was.
Right. And of course, I grew up like that too. Like, we were the first generation to really transfer from, you know, calling from a payphone to using a cell phone to call and things like that. But this is a great point. People don't think about pictures, right? Pictures. How many white people do you know that can go back and show you a picture of their great grandmother?
I have lots of pictures like that. Yeah.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
And they can show you various pictures of them. How many Black people do you know that can do that? Like, do they have even the technology?
Can't go back very far.
Right. So right there is a sign of privilege. The fact that you had access to a camera. It sounds so stupid and trivial, but that was a thing that was in the past that wasn't accessible to everybody. Like having your picture taking and having those pictures actually kept. Even from you moving around and having to develop a film. Could you imagine moving around and running for your life because you might get arrested for being a free slave in the wrong place, or lynched for being wrong? Like, your possessions are gone. It's like thinking about the Jews during the Holocaust. Like, their possessions were taken and gone. A lot of that stuff was lost. I'm surprised they were able to salvage as much as they did, because it was basically a genocide / assimilation. Because genocide means killing out a race. Assimilation is erasing the race, because you become what the culture here, as opposed to holding on to your own culture. The culture where you are, if you become and blend in without holding on to your culture, is assimilation. So that's what happened there. And
I think it was more subliminal for me, because it wasn't direct, where you had to run for your life or anything like that. But when you get books that were used that came from the white schools, although your father, my grandfather paid the same amount of taxes as any white man did, but we got secondhand books, obsolete books were given to the Black schools. That's subliminal. That's telling you something. This is what you deserve. And that can be very damaging to your esteem. It was something that was, exactly. But I was wise enough to know better. I went to a Catholic school. My first 9 years, I was in Catholic school. I'm not sure about the curriculum. I don't think they were even credentialed teachers. We had nuns and priests. But I learned a lot of things as far as moral issues were concerned. And I think it helped to understand how everything works and how things are that you're supposed to have. You know that that's something you needed, you didn't get. You know, you got obsolete history, you know, and that was only limited because you didn't get Black history, which I think that all history should be incorporated. And I think that the person who invent things should be mentioned as American, rather than just giving a name out there. Yeah, you would.
Right.
Yeah, I would like to see that happen, but it shouldn't be a separate thing because we're the founders of this nation. We were part of the founders of it. Look at that,
Right.
the Capitol building that was destroyed, trying to be destroyed by a bunch of white racist supremacists, was built by Black slaves.
Yeah. There was something I saw. It was America was stolen from the indigenous people, built by Blacks and Asians, and maintained by Latinos and Mexicans. And that's pretty much it. If you think about it, like, they came here, took the land, and then forced people who weren't from here to work on the land, and now still treat those people who are now transitioned into working as your farmers, your maids, your whatever. I mean, I'm being very stereotypical here, but that's usually the case. And that's how it was. That was the formation of this nation, was the stealing of other people's wealth, other people's backs to work for them, and other people's culture. And that's kind of the thing. It's so sad to see that. But in that area, in that arena, there are these brief pops of life that come through, like through our culture and through speaking with people and actually like talking to you and hearing your story, because we've never talked about that. And that was one of the things I missed out on with Dad, was not being able to hear his story and what he had to say. And I'd always ask questions, you know what I mean? I loved asking questions. I loved hearing his stories.
Yeah.
And I
you
wish
remember
I
when you guys were young, if your dad, we sat down in the living room by the fireplace, and your dad start telling stories of when he was in the military, and everything gets shut down. And I was asking that to Kevin. But you know what, Mom? I don't remember us watching that much TV. He says we did a lot more outgoing stuff, and then we got together. Remember, we would tell a story and we would have to continue it, and the next person would. A lot of fun, family time. We really did.
Right.
And
I remember that.
I think that's something unique. I just can't understand how parents don't spend that much time with their children anymore. It really bothers me.
Yeah.
Somebody else, or the child was on his own.
Yeah, and sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes it's.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, and but I know exactly what you're saying. Like, the quality time that's spent needs to be there, and
right.
And but also too, we live in a society where it makes it a lot harder to do that, because when your minimum wage is $7 an hour, and your rent is
unthinkable,
right, and your rent's $2,000 a month, you can't even pay your rent, much less have time to. So you have to work 2 jobs and things of that nature, and so there's things that. So okay, now let's talk about raising 4 Black men in this society. What steps did you take? You mentioned before making us feel superior. You mentioned before making sure that we had a stable background, and making sure that we had a stable foundation for our own beliefs and things of that nature. What were some of your biggest concerns with us growing up? I mean, I'm sorry, real quick too. I told people from Modesto, and I said, during this time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I said there was only, that I could think of, 5 or 6 Black families, right, during that time that I could think of, that I could name off, other than people that went to church. But everybody knew the Prescotts. Everybody knew us, just because there weren't that many Black people there. And plus, Mickey was just Mickey, and Kevin was Kevin, and like they were very outgoing and rebel rousers, which I honestly, looking back on some of the shit they did, I'm just like fortunate, that they didn't get in a lot more trouble. But for you, from your perspective, what lessons did you have to teach us, or what was it like to raise us? Not to
let anything hinder you. I didn't want you to think that anything was beyond your reach. And so you were not told, oh, don't go over there, don't do this. No, I actually encouraged you to go and meet new people. Oh, you can, sure. Ask them if you can play with them, And most of the time the answer was yes, I guess because of the boldness. You guys went over there to ask that, can I play too? And I don't know. It was just the fact that I did not want you to feel that you could not do anything you wanted to do. I never wanted you to feel that way, because I felt that way and it was miserable. I didn't want to pass that on.
Yeah.
So, that's the main thing. And then working with your dad, we never wanted to go against one another. So if your dad made a decision about something, I didn't come along and change it. If he said, this is the way it's going to be, I told Kirk this, he'll tell me, or I told Kevin this. I said, okay, whatever you say, we're going to stick together on this. So we made sure we stuck together on decisions. And the person who made the decision is the only one who could change the decision. It wasn't up to me to come. If I could talk him out of it, he would have to go and tell you. He changed his mind. It wasn't me coming along and usurping his authority in any kind of way. So I didn't want to give you that impression, but it was just mainly having confidence in yourself and not feel limited. Not feeling limited.
It's to follow up with that. I always saw Dad as the soft. You were the hard ass because you wouldn't change your mind very often when something happened. And people would always ask, well, what happened when you were going to the store? Like, did your mom beat you in the store? Nope. She never beat me in the store. But what she did do was saying, you know what? When you get home, I'm telling your father, or when you get home, you're gonna get a spanking. You're getting a spanking when you get home. And you shake right up and hope. And most of the time
you just that shit myself.
most of the time you would either forget, or you knew all along if you were to say that we would start acting right and shut up. And usually that's what got us into the line. But it's the pride, the manner in which we carried ourselves and everything else is very, very prominent in my life today. Like I get in trouble so much just for speaking my mind, but it's like, it's not right. If I see something wrong, I have to say something. And it's almost a detriment, but I'm so glad I have that instinct to say something and call people out. And I think especially this last year with all the events that are happening around, especially Black people that are coming back to life, it's like we're reliving the 60s. Like,
that's right.
Not much has changed, but we have so many more avenues for allies and so many more avenues to actually start being anti-racist as opposed to saying you're not racist, or I don't think racism, I don't see racism, I don't see color. It's like, no, motherfucker, you need to address that shit because we see it every day. And you may say, well, if people ask this shit all the time, well, how do you know it was racist, or how do you know? It's like, you just know. You know when something isn't right. Yeah. So stop giving me that shit. Like, stop telling me like, oh well, I don't see it that way. I'm like, no, because you don't live my life. Yeah.
But I was on the Salvation Army board with Dick Haggerty. There was a gentleman who was, I think he was the chairman that year, and he had stated, well, we had luncheons every month, and we had it at the Salvation Army. And we would pay $2, I think, $2 or $3. It wasn't very expensive to come and eat lunch and have the meeting. And some of us had to leave because I had to leave and go back to school because I had to be at a interview committee. I was on an interview committee and I had to go back to school for that. So I had to leave early. And so he says, well, he made an announcement. He says, okay, well, I'm going to start the meeting, but those who have to leave early, just leave your money by your plate and just go ahead and go. That way I don't have to stop. So there were various people getting up to go and during the meeting. And when I got up to go, he said, he stopped what he was saying. And he says, excuse me, don't forget to leave your money. Leave your $2. I says, well, I left $5. Is that okay? and I told Dick, I'm done. He says, he is just a racist pig.
Yeah. It's
because
to
he
stop
called me out,
for $2 fucking dollars.
Yeah, why did you call me out? $2.
Right, is he the newspaper boy from Better Off Dead? Leave your $2. Like, fuck you.
Yeah,
I love the fact you said let's $5.
It was so embarrassing. Okay? It's almost like, oh yeah, well, we have to get her because she's used to leaving nothing here when she just leaves when she's gone. That kind of thing. It just puts me on the spot, and I just thought, okay, that's it. I'm done. So I tell Dick Haggerty, I tell Dick, I said, look, I said, this guy's a racist. I'm not going back. Oh, he's not that way at all. Ooh. I said, look, you paint your face black and you go in there and see what kind of person he is. Then you come and tell me he's not a racist.
It's so funny. That excuse is done. Wait, listen.
I know
that excuse, but I want to go back to something. You're the Salvation Army, and your job is to donate and help other people, and you're worried about a person getting food and not leaving $2.
Right, exactly.
Are you serious?
The hypocrisy of it all.
but when you said paint your face black and see how it is, and then they say, oh, he's not that way normally. That excuse is over. That normally the phrase normally they aren't like this is fucking bullshit, because they would never be like that if it wasn't the case. There's no that's gone. Like, oh, normally they're so much nicer. Normally they're not like that. No. Normally they're a fucking asshole. Normally they're a fucking asshole, and you just look over.
Normally you don't see them interact with black people, is what they really need to say. I don't see how they interact with black people, but now I know how he is. That would be the honest answer, or the honest response, really.
Right. And but people don't see it that way. They just kind of, oh, normally, and they try to make excuses. Like, no, there's no more excuses. There's too much information, and there's too much history, and there's too much shit going on to not take notice in that. And for me, with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Trayvon back in the day, it's like
George Floyd with me.
Now, George Floyd is the one I wanted to get to, because this is going to set in something. I know I'm probably going to cry, and you might cry, but when I saw George Floyd die, like, I relived all the stuff that I never dealt with Craig. You know, like someone who's being held down and having their life slowly taken from them for no reason, but they have to find an excuse. And the fact that he was on camera and being recorded doing it, and it's just...
When I saw that, Kirk, I just cried. Mickey was here with me. He had to, help me out, because I just cried, because I imagine, I wasn't there when Craig died, but I imagine this is how he was feeling when this man was being crushed to death. Really, he was literally crushed to death. And so it just brings back old memories. It brings back all that agony and that pain and that grief. So I had a time with that.
Right.
Even going back and trying to get everything, in order as to what I went through with Craig. It was really difficult to do it. It took a long time for me to get through it, because you learn to live with it. It's like learning to live without your arm. You can still live, but you're always going to miss your arm. Right. You miss a child, your child's taken, that's not going to go away. So, it's not going. You don't get over that.
Yeah, Mom, we're going to get back to this. I just wanted to inform people who are listening / watching that my brother, your son, was killed in jail. He was murdered in jail, and under protective care at a place he used to work at the jail. He was murdered there. He was murdered there, and there was never really any true justice that happened. My mom's going to share some details, so we're probably going to both cry and let it all out, but we're here, and I want you to keep going about it, Mom. So all the stuff you told me before, and all the people involved in this case.
Okay, well, I'm going to be reading from this, so excuse me for not looking at the camera, but...
no, you need to look at the goddamn camera, woman. Look at the camera.
I love him. He's not really like that all the time.